Okay, this lesson for our Cornet Project class will demonstrate just how powerful it is when we make a commitment to demonstrate a point of view from which no contradiction appears. When we were working in our language, we've been doing it for years now, we came across this text, 1 Thessalonians 4:17, and we noticed that the dead in Christ would be raised first, then we ourselves, the living ones, the ones, and this word here, this preposition is a circle, so we'll say around. Here, this is the word from which we get remainder, so remaining around. And of course, this is deponent, middle passive form, but active in meaning. But here's where we then notice this is the word that's often discussed as rapture, caught up, and it's from harpazo, it's future passive, seized, will be seized away. Yeah, will be seized away. But here's where the contradiction or perceived contradiction occurred. We had this adverb here, simultaneously, and then together with this preposition, and them, referring to the dead in Christ that were first raised. Now, I know it was a problem because when I would publish it, people who advocated pre-trib took issue with it, not in a way that would give feedback for us, except to notice that apparently teaching simultaneously together with, since a lot of the solutions for that difficulty in the rapture and the return requires us to separate the return from the rapture because of the relationship of the tribulation. However, as the pre-trib rapture is taught according to Grace Evangelical Society, and you can go to faithalone.org and I'll place that there, even place it in the thumbnail. The way they teach it, it contains no contradiction. And here's a hard copy of the Grace New Testament commentary. And I went here, and again, this is about showing how difficult it is unless you're interested as a biblicist and you accept the premise the Bible contains no contradictions, which that really drives and compels for higher informed reasoning, and you really need to gather all the data as we were trained in the Missionary Baptist Seminary by Dr. John Penn, a holistic approach, and by our systematic theology professor, Dr. John Owen, categorical approach, and then by our linguistic scholar, Dr. Randy Murray, noticed the inflectional morphemes and the emphasis on kinds of action. So with all those good things, you put that together, and I went to the section on this, and I've mentioned this before, but again, this is the point of view from which no contradiction appears, and as taught by Grace Evangelical Society, the way they teach it, there's no contradiction. So let's look at it. It says Paul directly contradicts that fear that they had thought Christ had already come and now these people had died and they won't be here when Jesus returns, and to participate in that living rapture. The Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. These are the prophesied eschatological signs that attend the return of Messiah. This could refer to the rapture or the second coming or both. Now, he had my attention. Instead of either or, it was and also. Well, then he went on and said, most naturally, it refers to both, for the fact that we will meet the Lord in the air, not in heaven, suggests that Jesus' second coming takes 7 years to complete. The rapture and second coming are two phases of his return. Now, that's genius because it doesn't contradict the language. It does acknowledge the place that Jesus said he would prepare. So when we are, quote, in the air, as that's described, caught up away. Now, that's away from the earth, of course. So that's where you would find up away from in the direction being vertical. So all of this has been solved. And then we have the no contradiction because, for example, in the 7-year period, we then have the return here. We are seized away simultaneously. We're in the place, of course, and as we've noticed before in the ratio, 3.5 years, 3.5 years. In the ratio, 1,000 years to a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. We know so if we lived 100 years, it would only be 2.4 hours to the Lord. So in this case, that 7 years would be less than 10 minutes. So yes, it's very good answer, excellent answer. We do have, and remember the March 14th, 445. Now this is not Greek or Hebrew here. This is just simple arithmetic. And to AD 32, April 6th, that triumphant entry of Christ. And we noticed that was 483 years times 360 days. And that equaled 173,880 days. So we have a 70th week, 7 years times 360 days, that 70th week, this 7-year period of time there. And of course, when you go to Grace Evangelical Society and listen to the research they've done, he gives a great rationale for maybe as much as 30 days prior to this occurring. But to notice that it can be solved and knows how many years it was. And of course, I'd never availed myself of that resource and never checked that particular commentary, for example, because I was introduced to Grace Evangelical Society by someone else, and they were contending with some of the same controversies we were as a class trying to demonstrate, meaning it is able to be demonstrated. Now, for example, the advice we were given, the guidance we were given in the seminaries, if you can't solve it, then leave it alone. Don't just pick a side and just add to the endless banter. So this is the genius of committing to a view from where no contradiction appears, because when a solution like this comes together and we notice that the second coming, the return of Christ, and then the rapture, well, when we notice it's in phases, that absolutely corresponds and correlates directly with this. So it doesn't contradict. That's the brilliance of it. So that's enough. And again, we'll do more of these. We'll show where there's no contradiction as often alleged between, let's say, the regeneration before or after you believe the gospel, the contradiction between open and closed theism, that doesn't exist. But again, that takes a lot of study. So we'll demonstrate all this, but this is the view from which there is no contradiction. So the rapture, pre-trib rapture as taught by Grace Evangelical Society contains no contradiction. So have a good day and enjoy this lesson.